Hey, my name is Brandon Truesdell. If you don't know who I am, that's fine. I'm actually new around here, around these parts. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a guy who's seen a thing or two and just kind of has this thirst for knowledge. I like mental health and I like helping people, and so this is the best way that I feel I can help people. I want to help people understand that there are tools out there and that it's not as lonely out there in the world as you might think. Today, what I want to talk about is setting boundaries and setting strong yet fulfilling boundaries. I hope that I'm able to put a unique perspective on this. For me personally, I was someone who lacked boundaries, and I'm still working on proper boundaries for myself. And then on the other side of that, something that I don't struggle with is having too strong of boundaries, not letting people in, not letting certain situations play out in a proper and healthy way. So before I get into all of that on what a good boundary would be, I need to set up the premise of how important boundaries are. Boundaries literally are a life and death situation. If you think about it, the world has a boundary for the atmosphere. If we didn't have an atmosphere, we wouldn't have oxygen to breathe. It wouldn't keep in the oxygen, and it also wouldn't keep out all the meteors that are trying to kill us and end the world. Fun. We also, without boundaries, wouldn't have countries. As fun as having a united world where everybody's at peace with each other, that is unfortunately not going to happen. Everybody has different viewpoints. Different countries have different goals. They have different laws. They have different directions that everybody wants unless you're in a dictatorship. This is not going in exactly the direction that I was thinking, but in a healthy, or at least healthy enough country, there's a single direction that people are trying to achieve. They're trying to get there at different viewpoints, but at the end of the day, most of the people in that country are going to want to try and help each other out. They just have different ideas on how to do that. Anyway, then you have cities, then you have homes. Without homes, we'd be out in the open. We could get eaten, we could get murdered, we could get burned alive from the sun. Oh man. I swear, there's a positive side to boundaries. Then you have yourself as a human being. You can control, our skin is a boundary. You can control what you let into your mouth. You can control what comes out of your mouth with speech. You can kind of control other movements out of your system. But if you eat too much, you explode, for one. If you eat too little, you starve. And if you eat something toxic, you die. But if you eat just the right amount and what you need, and you can even indulge yourself from time to time, that's a healthy way of living. So now that I've set the premise of how dangerous the lack of boundaries are, I want to talk about the different types of boundary breaks that you can have. I look at it as there's like 3 different boundary breaks. There's a physical boundary break, there is a mental boundary break, and there's an internal boundary break. Physical, I like to look at it in the terms of, I'm going to give you an apple. Let's say I have an apple that I want to give to you, but you hate apples. And I take your mouth, I open it up, shove the apple in your face, make you chew it, and make you swallow. That would be a physical boundary break. I'm making you do something that you do not want to do. That is just, there's no point in doing it. A mental boundary break would be manipulation. If I lied to you, if I took a bite of that apple and I'm like, hey, this apple's delicious. It doesn't taste like apples at all. It actually tastes like oranges. And I give it to you, you take a bite, and you go, yuck, and you barf on the floor. That would be a mental boundary break. I lied to you. An internal boundary break is if I'm your best friend in the world, I have an apple, and I go, hey, this is a really good apple. I want to share this moment with you. And internally, you say, I hate apples, but you are my best friend, and I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want you, I feel maybe if I disappoint you enough that you'll run away, I'll take a bite of that apple. You broke your own boundary when you bite that apple, even if the other person doesn't know it. It's easy to understand a physical boundary break. If I were to, stab you in the stomach, that's not good. And you die, that's definitely not good. But do we die from a boundary break mentally or internally? And my answer to that is, yeah, you still do die from a boundary break from that. I mean, do we really exist if we deny ourselves of who we are? That's kind of like we're being just a shell of who we really are. And that's a really sad existence, if I'm being honest. To not be the bright and beautiful person that you could be, all because you deny yourself of having proper boundaries. So now that we've kind of established the importance of boundaries and how dangerous they can be and the types of boundaries, well, where do boundaries come from? Why don't we have boundaries, or why do we have too many boundaries? Because again, if you put a wall up and you don't have friends, or you barely let friends into your life, or you don't accept help, or you're not willing to help other people because they've turned that around against you, that's not a very fulfilling life, and you're going to be unhappy. You're going to be a little bit safer, I guess. You wouldn't have a community in case you needed help. But hey, at least they're not going to stab you in the stomach or give you an apple that you don't want. So it's yin and yang, really. But again, where do these boundaries come from? They were taught to you at a very early age, usually, mostly. If you had parents who were great parents and they were able to instill you with great self-esteem, say to you that you can say no to certain things, that you can be your own person, that it's okay to be selfish from time to time, or even most of the time, really, and gave you the desire to help other people, you're probably going to have a really good time in life, and you're probably going to build up really healthy and strong boundaries. If you didn't have that, if you had maybe manipulative parents or negative parents, or parents that didn't really give you the proper self-esteem that you needed in life to move forward, then that's gonna teach you some really bad habits. You're going to open up or close off people in very negative ways. The important thing to know is these lack of boundaries, or too much, or too many, or too strong of boundaries, it's not your fault. It was taught to you. And that's not to say that you can't do anything about it, or you shouldn't do anything about it, and you should be like, well, it was taught to me, so I'm not going to do anything about it. Oh well, my life is ruined. No. Even if something wasn't your fault, you still have a responsibility to do something about it, and you can do something about it. It doesn't mean that you have to feel guilty about it, but you can take responsibility, especially now that you know what's up. You can't just feign ignorance or anything like that. So where do we go from here? As far as how you retrain your brain on that's probably going to have to be a separate video, and there are people who are much better at it than I am. I'm just learning about it, really, and I've been experiencing it myself, because I'm a person who has experienced a lot of lack of boundaries. So I have to build up my sense of self and self-esteem, all that fun stuff. And I'm happy to say that I'm doing a pretty good job at it. So there's definitely, take it from my situation, I won't get into it, but there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel if you can go search for it. Richard Grannon is a great example of someone who can help you understand the psychology of what has happened internally to have these boundary breaks happen or these boundaries built up. He mostly talks about boundary breaking. So with all that being said, I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit and kind of bring in my own personal philosophy from other sources. In order to set proper boundaries, in order to have the right mindset for creating a boundary, now that we know the mechanics of a boundary and why they might happen, we have to understand, I'm gonna get my notes. We have to understand that, oh, my phone almost fell. Without boundaries, we will die. We were meant to be selfish, and life is only fulfilling when you help others. So those two things. How does that work? We were meant to be selfish, and life is only fulfilling when you help others. What? That seems kind of oxymoronic, right? Well, a mindset shift that I had to teach my subconscious was that it's okay to be selfish, because in order to help others, we must first help ourselves. What does that mean? It means if we want to be happy, we have to think about ourselves first. But we can do it in such a way to where we know if we can be strong individually as our own person and build ourselves up, that will give us the tools to be able to help other people. Now, there's a book called The Gift of Fear. I don't remember what the author is, and I've only read maybe the first chapter or two of it, but there was a story that came from it that really opened my eyes up to this philosophy that I kind of live by. There was a girl who had groceries, and she's going up to her apartment, and a stranger asked if he could help her take those groceries up to her apartment. Now, she could say yes or she could say no. I mean, who wouldn't want help from people? What you have to realize is if you take the absolute negative consequence of what might happen if you accept their help, and you have an internal dialogue on whether or not you could handle that situation, if you can't handle that situation, it's probably best to say no. If that person had really bad intentions to harm you, it probably would be appropriate to say no. If you could handle the situation, you could say yes. Hey, come on over, help me with my groceries. The point that I'm trying to make is if you can take a situation and you can handle the absolute negative consequence of it, that you can say no and you can back away, then that should give you a good idea if you can say yes. And you can come up with all these predetermined policies in your mind. A policy is what you are going to say no to before that situation even pops up. If someone asks me, I'm a video producer, I help people make branding videos. If someone says, hey, can we add, could we add maybe an extra minute clip to this for free? I would have a policy that says, no, there's no extra content. What you get in the contract is what you get. You have to pay for for other stuff. And if I had that personal policy in my head, I could just say, no, that's just policy. And they would understand that you've already set up a boundary. And that's all sort of from my understanding of, well, if I allowed that to happen, could I handle the negative consequence of my time consistently being sucked out of my life to where I wouldn't be able to do things that were fulfilling to me? And that's a good way of going about life, in my opinion. Now, the more we can open up to people and have the strength to be able to be in these situations where you can ask for help and you don't have to worry about them saying, oh, well, I helped you and you don't want to help me with this, you're a bad person. And if you can't handle that emotionally or mentally, you probably need to build yourself up. There's actually been multiple situations where I accepted help from someone who said it was completely free. It wasn't, there was no strings attached. But when they were trying to control me and make me do something that I didn't want to do, they used it against me, and it was negative. It gave me some difficulty being able to accept help from others. Here's another oxymoron type saying is you want to have strong boundaries. You want to have all the necessary boundaries, but you want to have as much of a boundary-less life as possible. You want to be able to help other people who you think are worthy of taking your time, or you think are worthy of accepting help from. All the while being able to say the most important word that you can ever say. It's a strong word. It is a just word. It is a kind word. And that word is no. We can say no with our bodies. If someone's trying to make advances on us that we don't want them, either violently or sexually, there's a poem that's quite famous. That's kind of short. It goes something like, "Hey, don't touch me there. That is my no-no square." But I mean, being able to create advantages in a situation like that, whether that's bodybuilding or owning some sort of weapon like mace or even a gun, yeehaw from Texas, that will allow you to say no in a very direct way. But even being able to build yourself up mentally and being articulate in how you present yourself and how you form arguments and how you communicate, that's a way of saying no and being able to combat manipulation and having the self-esteem that you need for yourself to be able to say no to internally to thoughts that would make you do things that you don't want to do. Hopefully this has given you a mindset on the tools that you should use in life to set proper boundaries. Don't build them up too strong. Don't let people trample on your boundaries. Find that right Zen-like, yin-yang-like, just middle ground. I'm going to link down below Richard Grannon's channel because he has a lot of great content on boundaries. He goes deep into boundary breaking and building up strong boundaries and the subconscious and the superego, all that fun stuff. So you can learn a lot about that and be able to build yourself up. My name is Brandon Truesdell. Thank you guys for tuning in. Feel free to like and subscribe because I'm going to be creating a lot of great content, fun content, skits, mental health videos, all that fun stuff. Talk to you guys later.